When Kit 75342, the Republic fighter tank, came out last year, it was well received because of the unique figures that came with it, the 187th Troopers and Mace Windu and things like that. But there was pushback from the community with regards to some of the features and functionalities that actually were built into the set. And honestly, from my perspective, it comes out of the box as more of a play set for younger builders than an actual display set for older and adult fans of Lego like myself that would most likely use this piece as a display or perhaps to be added into a Clone Wars MOC and things like that. So what I ended up doing is going on Rebrickable as I always do, and I found myself a very nice custom MOC of this build by a user called 2Bricks Official, all one word. And his design, as you see here, adds and subtracts from this design in ways that I feel make this a much more impressive display set, while still allowing it to be a very nice play set if you have a younger builder that may want to do this MOC or may want to play with your particular set once you've modified it. His design uses roughly 354 pieces, which is almost 100 pieces more than the standard set. And about 75% of that build comes from the original set. I ended up still having to purchase that difference between them from Bricklink. I just still don't have a very large inventory. But the pieces on Bricklink were reasonably priced, about $10 to $15 in total. There were no rare pieces or anything like that that will cause users to have a hard time finding them, things like that. So overall, it's a very easy to manage MOC and still get it together very well. As you can see here visually, starting at the front, there's a couple of key design functions and features that I really enjoy. The first major one is that rather than having this flat, structure for the frame of the tank, it actually has a more realistic, if you will, hinged side pieces. So these pieces actually can adjust up and down. It does ride on some clear pieces on the bottom, which gives you a little bit more of that ability to customize this to look a little more realistic to what you would envision the Clone War tank actually being. These side pieces still maintain, if not 100%, at least 95% of what you would build in the Lego kit, all the way down to all of the stickers still mount everywhere on this in the appropriate sections. So you'll have no issues with anything looking off or needing additional sticker sets. And in my mind, even though it does have what some people call the rather large sticker set, I don't think it's very, very difficult or very large. It's only about less than a dozen stickers in total. They go on pretty easily. If you have a semi-calibrated eyeball, you won't have a major problem, but it's rare. I won't lie. It is rare if I actually get them on straight. So I do understand the complaints of others. One of the other areas that he has done some significant changes to is this nose on the front section. As you can see here, he's actually slimmed it down by a full width on both sides as compared to what you see here on the actual picture of the design. And in doing so, it gives it a bit of a sleeker overall appearance. And based on the way his hinge is designed, it uses different pieces from the standard set. So it goes together and actually connects better and more flush with the overall body of the tank. Whereas one of the complaints from a lot of the user groups out there was that there's a gap, and a significant gap in the actual standard build. So great job on that. I think he really made that front nose look a lot better. Moving on to the turrets on the side, as you can see here, he has centered the main guns on both sides and actually built the projectile launchers into the overall design, so they're not functional and they're not visible. So it's a nice clean, cannon on both sides. And I think it looks a lot nicer from a display perspective as compared to having those projectile launchers on the sides. So you do lose that as a play feature, but again, if you're using this in a MOC or as a display piece, I think it's much more effective and looks much better. On the top here, as you can see, he's done away with just that standard trooper rifle that's in the standard set for the turret and actually designed a small little turret that fits on the top and allows that top gunner to really blend in better, and in my mind, that's a much nicer look to this tank overall. On the rear, it's very much the same in what you would build for the standard. There's not a lot of changes with the exception of the inside. In 2Brick's actual design, and I do apologize for the poor lighting, he does have you mount the display panel, which would have been at the top of the turret in the normal design inside, so that your driver now has an actual control panel. And he builds a second piece in there to function as a backrest with an adjustable headrest. What I see myself doing is actually going in there and actually putting in one of the Lego standard seats, because I think that will allow me to get a trooper in and out of there better. It'll sit more effectively and possibly even give me enough room to have that third crew member fit in there better when you have this rear hatch sealed. And that does lead to one of the detractions of this build, at least in my opinion, is that by slimming this down, it gives it a much better appearance, but realistically, you're not going to get a figure in there unless he's lying down, kind of just hiding in there, for lack of a better word. So it really wouldn't seat somebody in there very well. But it does serve as a great place to store weapons and things like that. You could even probably put a couple of those cargo crates in there and make this more of a utility section rather than an actual driver's section. Again, the other thing, you do lose those projectile launchers, as I said, but from a display perspective, I actually like that better, and I think that's a much more efficient use of the tank as a whole. The only other small thing I ran into is the way this rear hatch sits on here. I was having an issue with just a small amount of gap in shortness in the length of the hatch connection to the side panels. And it could have been just my poor building skills, or maybe it's just a slight difference based on how we've modified the frame with these changes. But I ended up having to add one small round stud in there to make it wide enough to sit with enough force that there wasn't a risk of this piece coming off. And the only thing that does do is it does put this slightly off center because I've got one more stud on one side. And perhaps there's a better solution to doing this. I just kind of put this together on a whim, so there might be a better way to do that. Another small change that I made is on his design, it's just the squared off top frame. Whereas on the standard build, it uses these quarter round pieces to actually create a small circular front. So I took those because they end up being spare pieces and put them on each side of the turret, which I think gives it a nicer, more rounded design, kind of blends it a little better when the hatch is closed to look more like a tank hatch as a whole. And speaking of spare pieces, even though you're adding roughly 100 pieces to this entire design, you do end up with quite a bit of pieces left over. And again, these pieces are all used primarily for that more rigid and straight frame. So you do end up with a good chunk of pieces left over. But the nice thing is it's not your standard little 1x, 2x pieces. You've got some nice bricks, some nice plates, Technic pieces. You have a nice selection that could be used in this color scheme in any type of MOC that you're building or in any other future designs that you're looking at. So I think that's kind of a nice thing. You're spending a little bit of money, but you're getting enough spare pieces left over that could be effectively used in something bigger down the line and more enjoyably. And perhaps once I've looked at this a little bit, I might find some small places to put some of those on here, maybe to flesh out some of the sides, reduce some of the studs that are visible. But I think overall, as is, it's a very nice build. And I don't know if I'm really going to mess with it too much, other than perhaps adding a couple of small, transparent wedges on the top to kind of give more of a spotlight effect at the front. And another small thing is, as I do say here, is he's added some of those small spotlights on the front. Again, just those small details that from a play feature, not very important, but from a display feature, just make this have a little more functionality and look and feel of something that you could see yourself, envisioning on a clone battlefield somewhere out there in the galaxy. So again, overall, very fun build. It takes roughly an hour. It's not much longer than your normal build for the standard tank, other than you will find yourself having to tear the bags open. His PDF instructions start from square one, so there is no pre-assembly using the standard instructions. It does start you from the very first brick all the way to the final product. And it's a very easy and very well made PDF, so I give him kudos on that as well. It was very easy to follow and understand. So if there's any questions from anybody out there or any suggestions on perhaps how to further modify this to bring it more in line with some of the standard aspects of what we think one of these tanks should have, please feel free to reach out or make a comment below. If you need additional photos or have any questions about how I built this MOC, please feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to share information. And I will provide a link to Two Bricks' official Rebrickable webpage so that you can get these instructions, which are free, from the Rebrickable site, and go ahead and start ordering your pieces. Again, I think you'll enjoy this build. You'll have a great time doing it, and you'll end up with a very nice display piece that still has a lot of great play functionality for any user that wants to go ahead and put this together. So again, this is Old and Surly, and keep building.